Good evening. My name is Kester, and welcome to this week's episode of Fascinating Physics, where we examine exciting advancements in modern day physics. I am very honored to be in the presence of one of the nation's leading physicists, whose unintended discovery propelled the field of cosmology and helped lay the foundation for our current understanding of the origins of the universe. Arguably one of the most important scientific discoveries of the 21st century, it earned him the Nobel Prize in 1978. Thank you for having me tonight. It is certainly my pleasure and my honor to be here to share my story. It is very great to have you out here tonight. Could you please introduce yourself by telling us your name and your project? Sure. My name is Arno Penzias. On May 20th of 1964, I was working at Bell Laboratories with my colleague Robert Wilson when we had accidentally discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation. Our discovery of the CMB served as the first evidence of the Big Bang event that had created our universe 13.8 billion years ago. It is the remnant thermal radiation created about 400,000 years after the Big Bang. And these primordial photons permeate our entire universe. Fascinating. And the story behind how you both discovered the CMB is equally as thrilling as well. What were you guys trying to do or to find? As I just mentioned, we did not intend to seek out this cosmological background radiation. In 1960, the laboratory had just constructed a large 20-foot horn antenna that was originally used for the ECHO satellite project to commercially receive radio signals from these gigantic mylar balloons up in the atmosphere, amplify those signals, and then transmit them across large distances. A couple of years later, a new satellite named the Telstar was launched, which then freed up the horn antenna for Bob and me to conduct radio astronomy. We set out on our research in early 1963. Our intention with the horn antenna was to measure the intensity of radiation emissions from the Milky Way galaxy as to effectively utilize this extremely precise calibration. This required the elimination of all noise to make these careful observations. We needed complete silence. However, yet we kept encountering this strange static noise that consisted of these completely unstructured yet persistent signals. But we could not pinpoint where these signals were coming from, for these microwaves were coming from every which way direction. Bob and I had ruled out numerous possibilities at the time, including military testing as well as urban interference. We believed also that it was because there were these pigeons nesting inside the antenna. So we went in and cleaned their droppings and we released them out in the wild, and they just kept coming back. And unfortunately, we had to kill the birds in the name of science with a shotgun. But yet this noise was still there. I had then stumbled across Princeton professor Robert Dickey's predictions regarding his theory of the presence of a low-level background radiation throughout the universe if a Big Bang event were to have occurred to, start the universe. In conjunction with Bob and his team at Princeton, Bob Wilson and I had published our findings about this noise in the Astrophysics Journal in 1965. For it was Professor Dickey who had realized this noise was in fact the cosmological microwave background radiation he had been predicting all along. Could you tell us a little bit more about where did the project or experiment occur? As I've already alluded to, Bob and I were working at Bell Laboratories in Holmdel, New Jersey. When we conducted our research together, I had finished my PhD thesis under Professor Charles Towns at Columbia University after working on building a MASER, which stands for Microwave Amplification by Simulated Emission of radiation. Yes, it's a mouthful. And we were using these masers to measure and amplify signals from spaces between galaxies. It was work with masers and lasers that earned Professor Towns a share in the Nobel Prize in 1964, actually. I was in search of a temporary John upon completion of my thesis at Bell Labs to complete the observations from my thesis work. For I was drawn to the horn antenna because of its interesting properties. That was in 1961, and I've stayed there for the next 37 years. Throughout my time at Bell Labs, I slowly transitioned from a career in astronomical research and supporting technological advancements to managerial positions where I led the research of other people. I climbed up this hierarchy to where I eventually served as the vice president of research before I had left the company for Silicon Valley. Wow, that sounds like an incredible journey. To give us some context on the time period surrounding your and Dr. Wilson's discovery of the CMB, what other significant events were happening around the world at the time? That was about the early to mid 1960s, which marked the height of the Cold War. We had just the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs invasion, highlighting the tensions and lingering possibility of nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union at the time. The military-industrial complex was in full swing, in which the triangular partnership between the military and the government, private industry, and academia fueled many of the scientific and technological advancements at the time. America was also at the height of the space race as well, as we aimed to beat the Soviets in placing a man on the moon, which was eventually culminated in the Apollo 11 moon landing in July of 1969. Not only did America face a lot of tension and strife on the international stage, but also within the nation as well. The Vietnam War had raged on, which sparked numerous protests against the war by the counterculture movement at the time. In addition, the civil rights movement was gaining traction as it promoted racial equality and justice. I can still remember the day when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1964. It really sent shockwaves all throughout the nation. The 60s were a very thrilling time, yet a very turbulent time in the United States. Indeed they were. Going back to the project, who else was involved in it? Of course, I share credit of this discovery with my dear friend and colleague Bob Wilson. Serendipitously, around the same time that the horn antenna was freed up for astronomical research, it was early 1963, I recall. We at Bell had just hired Bob, another radio astronomer who had just finished up his PhD thesis at Caltech. Bob was from Texas, so he had this special charm and grit as if he came straight out of a John Wayne movie. I fondly remember Bob and I climbing into the antenna to scrub out pigeon droppings. When we had first detected that background noise that was just persistent in our measurements, it prevented us from performing the original experiment we had intended. So it really was a disappointment at the time. Little did we know that we had discovered the CMB, that initial light that was created at the birth of the universe. Had it not been for Bob Dickey at Princeton, I met on plane another radio astronomer by the name of Bernard Burke, who was working at the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism in Washington, D.C. at the time. He urged me to call Bob Dickey. For Bob theorized that if the universe were to have originated from a Big Bang event, in which the universe was originally in that hot, dense state, then there must be some sort of cosmic background radiation at a temperature of approximately 3 degrees Kelvin. Or, 3 Kelvin, if, pardon. he and his team were just about to perform their own measurements when we had just gotten into contact with them. And it's pretty funny when we just got off the phone, Bob hit the phone, and he told his team, "Boys, we've been scooped." Bob Wilson and I ended up publishing our findings on the background noise, the noise that we had found, in conjunction with Bob Dickey and his team. However, Wilson and I had simply reported our observations, whereas Dickey and his team, they focused on how the discovery of the CMB was evidence for the Big Bang Theory. They put it in light in context of the origins of the universe. To clarify, what was your role in the project? At the time, Bell Labs had only 2 radio astronomers, Bob Wilson and me. So it was us 2 who jointly headed the radio astronomical research efforts with the Horn antenna. Discovery of the CMB was a joint effort. So if I had to describe my role in the experiment, I cannot neglect to mention Bob's role in it as well. We had published that paper of our results with both our names on it, for our roles in stumbling upon and deciphering that noise in the Horn antenna were equal. I am extremely honored to share in this discovery with Bob. And because of our collaboration in this experiment, we were both awarded an equal share in the Nobel Prize in 1978. We actually were awarded each a quarter of the prize, because also a Soviet physicist named Pyotr Leonidovich Kapitsa, I think I'm pronouncing that right, was also recognized that same year for his work in low temperature physics. It had nothing to do with our work, but the Nobel Committee at the time wanted to recognize both of our works. So, thank you. Winning the Nobel Prize is no small feat, for it meant that your work was truly revolutionary to the advancement of modern science and technology. What impact did your project have on the physics community? Prior to our discovery of the CMB, there were 2 rival schools of thought regarding the origins of the universe. The first theory was called the steady-state theory, first conceived by Fred Hoyle, Tommy Gold, and Herman Bondi, which postulated that the universe had no beginning or end. Under the steady-state hypothesis, the overall density of the universe remains the same, for the matter is continually created as the universe expands. The observable universe then is homogeneous. It's unchanged throughout space and time. Actually, when Bob and I stumbled across the CMB, Bob was a proponent of the steady-state theory and was uncomfortable with how it could be used as proof for the proposition of the Big Bang Theory, which is why we had just shared and stated our findings when we had published our discovery. Other physicists, such as Bob Dickey, held the Big Bang hypothesis, first formulated by George Gamow, Ralph Alpher, and Robert Herman in the 1940s. The Big Bang Theory states that all the matter in the universe was created in a single explosion approximately 13.8 billion years ago, which led to a rapid expansion from an extremely hot, dense state into the constantly expanding universe as we know today. The discovery of the cosmological microwave background radiation laid the groundwork for the acceptance of the Big Bang model as the prevailing and most widely accepted theory on how the universe was formed. The CMB, as it turned out, had a black body radiation curve with a temperature of 2.725 Kelvin, which fell in line with the value as predicted by Einstein's general theory of relativity. In light of Edwin Hubble's earlier formulation of the relationship that galaxies were moving farther away from each other as a result of due to the expansion of space, the discovery of the CMB at the time was the first concrete evidence that the universe had started off with the Big Bang. At the time, studying the origins of the universe was often looked down upon by scientists and physicists. So Bob and my discovery of the CMB truly propelled the field of cosmology into the discipline that we know it today. Fascinating. Before we conclude this interview, may I ask who or what helped inspire or influence you as you progressed throughout your career? My family, of course. I was born to a Jewish family in Munich, Germany in 1933. When I was 6 years old, my family and I was rounded up to be deported to Poland, but we were sent back to Munich just days later. I did not understand what was going on at the time. I had suspected it may have been to do because we were Jewish, but since then, my mother and father, they did everything they could to send our family to America. Shortly after, my younger brother and I were placed on a train by ourselves to Great Britain, and shortly after, my mother and father followed. With tickets that my father had bought a year and a half prior, we had set sail on the Cunard liner, the Georgic, toward America in December of 1939, and then we landed in New York in January 1940. My parents made sure my brother and I attended school. They worked as supers or superintendents of an apartment building so that we did not have to pay for our basement apartment, so that my brother and I, that we had that second income in our family, as well as that our mother could also attend to my brother and me during the day. Eventually, my mother gained a factory sewing job, and my father became a carpenter for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. My parents had worked tirelessly to provide for our family so that my brother and I could achieve that American dream, and without their foresight to escape Nazi Germany right at the height of the war. Right, or not at the height of the war, but right at that beginning of the war. It was 1939. I doubt I would be here today. They helped foster a thirsting value for knowledge as they pushed me to further my education and pursue a college degree in science. I became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1946, graduated from Brooklyn Technical High School in 1951, obtained my degree from City College of New York in 1954. That was my bachelor's degree. Married and served for 2 years in the U.S. Army Signal Corps before applying to Columbia and getting my PhD and being where my position at Bell Labs. I would have not been able to accomplish all of this and be where I am today had it not been for my parents' sacrificial decision to move us to the United States. They served as my models of hard work and throughout my entire career, and I am forever grateful to their love and sacrifice. Thank you, Dr. Penzias, for sharing your story about how you and Dr. Wilson discovered the cosmological microwave background radiation. Our current understanding of the universe would not have been possible had it not been for your discovery of the CMB. To that, on behalf of the science and physics community, we are truly grateful for your work. Well, thank you, Kester. It was truly my pleasure to be speaking with you today. I do hope that any aspiring scientist out there may be inspired by my and Bob's story to always possess that thirst for knowledge that continues to enlighten our understanding of the world and our universe. That is all we have for tonight's episode of Fascinating Physics. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and may you be fascinated by physics. Good night.